My name is Jules Urbach. I am the CEO and founder of OTOY. OTOY's mission is to create tools and technology for artists, democratize content creation, and we also have ambitions for advancing the state of the art of rendering, media publishing, and really, to be honest, the future that we see is not just limited to 2D pixels and screens, but something closer to spatial computing, the holodeck, things that are in science fiction is 3D mediums that we all want to experience. And I think that that's part of what the talk today is going to be about. We are very proud to also contribute to the Blender Development Fund. Our relationship with Tan and Blender and Fernando really began in earnest last year. I was actually at BCon in Amsterdam, and it was wonderful. This is sort of an update on that talk. Our desire is for Blender to be connected to bigger systems and bigger things that we're working on. Among those things, we have our own render, Octane. Cycles is wonderful. We love both. But we also have digital double services for being able to bring in actors and synthetic characters into the content pipeline. And we also have cloud rendering. And cloud rendering is something that we think is pretty essential when you're talking about doing media that is for VR, even the Vegas Sphere, which we actually do renders for. And all this is done on distributed GPUs on the render network. And today we are very pleased to announce that we are, one, bringing Blender and Cycles native files to the render network. That is a proposal that has been submitted to the community. The render network is actually run by a foundation, like the Blender Foundation, separately from OTOY. And more importantly, we're making access to the network completely free. It used to be behind an OTOY subscription that is now being decoupled. So decentralized rendering for the win. I think that this is going to be great for Blender. And for the rest of this talk, I want to show the kinds of things that we're doing that could leverage some of this technology, but also just talk about the big picture. As I was mentioning, really spatial computing and holographic rendering. Well, there is something in science fiction, right, that represents that really well, and that is the Star Trek holodeck. Show of hands, Star Trek fans in the audience? Good amount. Great. Well, then one of the things that I'm going to be pleased to share with you is some of the work that we're doing on Star Trek with Paramount, with Roddenberry. But for those that aren't familiar with the holodeck, it's a room on the Starship Enterprise that you go into, and it can recreate anything. You can even talk to it and tell it what you want, and it'll create an entire scene for you. It'll create characters, scenarios, interact with you. Sounds a lot like what we're seeing today with LLMs and ChatGPT and the like, but also generative AI, obviously. It feels like it's a mirror of this, what was a futuristic technology. In the show, the holodeck also has another purpose, which is that, as it turns out, in the last episode of Enterprise, one of the shows that was on in 2005, the entire show was actually inside the holodeck, and it was characters from future Enterprise, peering into the past. And so there was sort of a meme in Star Trek, but also, if you think about the simulation theory, that everything you're seeing is inside of a higher hierarchical simulator. And in the case of Star Trek, it could be a more advanced Enterprise with a better holodeck. There's even memes for that. There was a short that came out by Paramount called Holodecks All the Way Down. And our work on Star Trek is to recreate it, to bring that into things that you can experience both online in VR and AR, and eventually the holodeck itself. And you can see some of the beautiful work that our team is doing, much of it in Blender, which I'll be talking about. And it looks just like the original show. And we're doing things from a particular period, like the 90s. We're taking every effort to make sure that it is quiescently identical to the original. The holodeck itself also has a larger footprint, I think, in people's minds, in the media. I mean, there's a lot of, you can see the New York Times, you have Jensen talk about the holodeck, you have Disney getting a award for somebody that made a holodeck for the Imagineering team, and you have Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, talking about how important the Star Trek holodeck is to his thinking. And of course, as you look at what OpenAI is doing, especially with Sora, I'm sure many of you have seen Sora, it's a video generator. It changed my view of where AI is going, and this is only in February, so this is how fast the space is moving. Variety did this study, which was average people that may not even have heard of Sora, and they showed them the videos, and they said, which ones are created by humans, which ones are created by AI. And this is not even 3D rendering. This is not our world where we create a render. This is completely synthetic content. They did a video, or Sora created a video from Big Sur. 60% of the people thought that was real. That was the highest rated video. And it's weird to me because you're not really sending 3D models, you're not doing ray tracing, but something's happening inside of that latent space that's generating these videos. And understanding that, I think, is actually a really good way to understand how this technology will impact us. I mean, I consider myself to be an artist. I love 3D tools. That's why I founded OTOY. And I want to understand this technology. I want to understand what place we have in it. So one of the things you can do, and others have done this, not just me, is you can take these videos from Sora and you can see what is inside of there. You can extract them, right? You can generate a NeRF or a splat. And as it turns out, there is an actual really high consistent 3D model that's inside of all these scenes. That's how it has temporal stability. You can turn it into a USDZ, you can explore it. None of these things are perfect, but it points to something interesting that's happening. Sora is showing what's probably also the case even in simpler AI generative media like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or Stable Video, that there is a 3D model in latent space. And if you'd only ray trace into it, you wouldn't need to extract it. You could use it with the tools and with the controls that we have as artists using things like Blender. And so we've been experimenting with that. First, by just creating a neural object, not quite to the same level of Sora, but as close as we can train it on anything. 3D models, I mean, obviously NeRFs are a representation of that, people, photos, and the outputs look really good. I mean, obviously, if you've seen NeRFs and Gaussian splats, those things include reflections. Obviously, relighting those is interesting. Simulating those is even more complex, but Sora is kind of doing all that inside. And our own work, I mean, part of what OTOY does is digital doubles. We've been doing that for 15 years. We scanned in almost every actor in Hollywood, and we've given 3D models to ILM for use in every Marvel movie. The stuff we're doing internally, especially as we're looking at bringing characters into our Star Trek experiences, are things related to neural rendering. Not deepfakes, not just 3D models, but things that, for example, that you can use to de-age an actor. This is showing a neural render of Patrick Stewart, just an internal test, de-aging 40 years. Taking physical makeup or even digital makeup. We did a CG version of Captain Pike, who was the original captain before Kirk, brought it back on the actor that's playing him now, and it can save hours in the makeup chair. When it comes to bringing back a character that is completely generated from whole cloth, I mean, obviously, poor Leonard Nimoy is no longer with us. He passed in 2015, but we are putting a digital Spock in our Star Trek experiences, and we first showed the first photo of that a couple of years back, actually, and it's interesting, people got confused. They got confused. They thought Leonard Nimoy's photo, which was, I guess, on the left here, they thought that was our synthetic Spock. And there was this whole kerfuffle where they had a fight about it, but the truth is, your memories are tricky. Your ability to remember whether something is real that you've seen or not can actually be mixed up, and that was fascinating for me to see. 2 years later, we have an actor that is portraying Spock. Initially with makeup, you'll see that in a little bit, but this is a full neural render. It's basically using his head as the source, as the anchor, and it's rendering the hair, the ears, and it looks amazing. And more importantly, this is being done in collaboration with Paramount, the Nimoy estate, and it's very powerful and emotional for certainly the family to sort of see these things, and for us as fans of Star Trek to even work with this. But I will say there's an actor underneath there, right? There's Lawrence Selleck, our actor, portraying Spock. There's no, prompt to generate a Spock model. That, I think, would be weird. And it comes to a philosophical crossroads for rendering an AI, where if you don't have any artist or an actor or anyone that's really doing, the generation of the work, or at least underpinning it, what do you have? And that's something that almost feels like you need an artistic Turing test. I mean, is an AI that's able to generate something from a prompt or an idea all the way to the end, including an actor, is that something that we really want as artists or creators? Maybe not. But if it does do it, and if society accepts completely generated content, maybe that means that there is a thinking, authentic, something inside there. And it's a philosophical question that we are not yet ready to answer. But Gene Roddenberry, when he was writing Star Trek, played with this concept a lot. Decker and Ilea from the Star Trek motion picture. Decker makes this decision: I believe this robot, this recreation, has a soul. It's the woman I loved. It's a recreation, but it's her. And I'm jumping into the, effectively the metaverse with her. And that was a choice, that was made in the story of Star Trek. But obviously, the things that we do as a society are much larger and more impactful than one single point in the story. So to that end, I mean, some of the things we're involved with is open standards, being able to, we started IDEA, which spun out of our initial work with MPEG, to create a standard for digital doubles, for faces, for rights, right? Talent agencies that can control where your likeness is used. And I'm sure many of you are familiar, SAG, the Screen Actors Guild. There was a whole, big kerfuffle last year where they really negotiated hard with the studios to come up with rights for AI, for duplication. They were right to do that. It's scary. And one of the things that I really like about how this ended up and SAG's position on this is that they're saying, I'm going to sort of summarize the quote here, that if you're looking at machine learning and AI as tools that are like physical prosthetics but not digital, that's something that's great for the industry because it means that actors have a job. And there are artists, right? We know this because we're doing digital prosthetics, that are also working on this. So in a sense, it doesn't replace anything. It just augments our skills. And I think from that perspective, AI or machine learning with the kinds of tools that we have and the tools that artists and creators have, very powerful. We've also added other members to IDEA. Endeavor is the largest talent agency. My close friend and brother from another mother, Ari Emanuel, been working with me for 20 years. Endeavor owns WME, IMG, UFC. Half of Hollywood pretty much runs through it. So they joined IDEA. We also brought in Stability AI and OpenUSD, who is no longer part of Stability, is really part of this so that we can bridge these things together. What's the intersection between AI and Hollywood and us as digital VFX artists? There's a lot to be sorted out there, but the idea is that we can work with the guilds, we can create clean data sets and create tools for artists that allow this to be used in a healthy, and positive way for humans, right? Some of the things that we're exploring with the Stability Partnership is coming up with ways to improve temporal stability, to make sure that data sets are trained on clean data, that it's rewards for artists that are contributing any data, and that's something that we can handle through some of the systems that we built. And honestly, probably many Blender users have played with some of these tools already. Stable Diffusion, because it's open, has been integrated in almost everything. You have Comfy UI, right, in Blender. There's multiple projects that have been using that to create really interesting outputs and animations and so forth. So that's sort of where we see AI's role in a healthy way intersecting with our work as artists and what we want to see out of our communities. And then there's, going back to the holodeck, right? What's the interim step? Well, I think one of the things we want to bring to Blender users is the ability to render very large format outputs on the cloud through the render network. We're seeing that with the release of the Vision Pro, and I'll be showing examples of that. But the idea of being able to render 16K by 16K on the cloud, really useful. We've been using that for our own work. And that work has been embodied by the Gene Roddenberry Archive, the project I was referring to a little bit earlier. Gene Roddenberry's son, Rod Roddenberry, invested in OTOY. We've been working on this for years, but about 3 years ago, we showed our first real effort into bringing the world of Star Trek with that archive into a tangible, visible form, and that was by recreating the Starship Enterprise digital double, every aspect of it. You're seeing that even the planets outside the ship, engineering, all of it's there, and all the enterprises, not just the one that was on screen, but the designs, the documents, the various versions that existed and transpired to the TV show. And if you look at the entire history of Star Trek, there's about 14 enterprises that some preceded Kirk's Enterprise, some followed. One of the more famous ones, of course, is from the Next Generation, Picard's ship. Picard had a different ship in the films. And more recently, we brought in the actors, including William Shatner. He gave us a 2-hour interview a year ago that's incredible, and we're putting those things out in pieces. We're taking his interview, and by the way, he's sitting in our virtual recreation in an air wall of the Enterprise bridge, and we're bringing that to life. That same month that we put out Mr. Shatner's interview, we opened up on the web the entire archive, which has all the 14 enterprises. The Smithsonian covered it, which is really exciting to us because the Smithsonian is where you'll see the physical 11-foot Enterprise. Here's the web portal, roddenberry.x.io. You can go there now and you can explore all of this in a browser. It's streamed from the cloud. And we're building more and more. There's obviously tons of ships in the world of Star Trek. This summer, we're putting out every single planet in order from the TV show. And I mentioned that we also were taking some things from Shatner's interview and bringing those to life. He wrote a book where Spock visits Kirk's grave and comes back to life. And we did a vignette, which appended one of the interview segments. I want to play that next, so if we can roll that video, that'd be great. Thank you. That was fun to put together, and people loved it. It's on YouTube, on the OTOY channel, but that's the work that the team's doing. It's awesome. We're doing more of that, but I'm so glad that we're able to share that. On the other side of things, on the production side, archiving the actual physical props from Star Trek is a really big deal for us too. Just yesterday, it was announced the original model of the Enterprise, preceding the one in the Smithsonian, was found. And Rod, my best friend, benefactor of the Roddenberry Archive, bought it and is putting it in a museum. And I was there the day that it was verified. I took a little 3D scan of it that's going in the archive, but it's just incredible to be part of this process and to also just take in every artifact. I mean, a lot of collectors have come back to us and said, scan this, bring this into the archive, and we've done that. So we have the physical as well as the in-universe versions. Paramount actually brought us in on the end of Picard Season 3. We scanned in the TNG set. I got to take a photo in the captain's chair, which was crazy. And when we don't have those props, we can build them. The team is incredible at recreating those things just from photos in incredible detail. So where we can, we have a version in the archive of both the actual production asset and the in-universe version. And it gets really detailed. There's Kirk's room, there's Kirk's bathroom, the toilet's flush. And how do we build it? Well, Blender is a big part of it. About half of our team, well, we do use C4D and Unreal and many other things. Half the team is using Blender, and the beautiful things you're seeing are created in Blender. So I just wanted to do a shout out to the great work that's being done by the Blender Foundation and the team. We wouldn't be here doing this if it weren't for Blender, and that's one of the reasons why we want to give back to the Blender community. There are things even outside of the Roddenberry Archive that are connected to the work we're doing. You can see some of those from Warner Brothers, but it's exciting. The other aspect of this project is documenting the history of those shots. We brought in the director of the pilot episode of Star Trek. He was 94, 95, and we effectively had him recreate or reshoot those things, and that was fascinating. You can see how great that looks. And then on the printed side of things, 40% of Star Trek's history comes from comics and novels, and we're able to bring those things to life, including Mr. Shatner's own Star Trek story, which you saw partly recreated there. And that's the magic of the archive as well, is we can bring those things to new users. When it came to casting Spock, we did it two ways. We did a digital creation of Spock, but we also brought in actor Lawrence Selleck. And before we did anything digital, we got him to be as close to Leonard as possible. And you can see there, that's him without any digital anything, and it looks great. And yet, when we came time to shoot, we did technology that allowed us, while we were shooting live on camera, to add details to his eyes and his nose and his lips to make him look even closer to Mr. Nimoy. You saw the more recent technology where we can fully recreate a 3D head. When we do the captures, we also do them in 4D. So you can see I can take the shot and I can look at it from any angle, relight it. When we are doing production, we sometimes shoot it 3 ways on green screen, with 3D scan data. It's just actors playing Yeoman Colt from the Star Trek pilot. And the other thing is, when people see things in the archive and they love it, we've also said, oh, if only this character, Arex from the animated series, was a real thing. We can 3D print those assets, and we take that 3D printed CG model that we created, put it back in the next shoot in a physical, on a physical stage, which is what we're experimenting with here. So there's a lot of digital and physical intersections between these worlds that the Roddenberry Archive is exploring. As far as where this is going and how you can see it beyond the web, Vision Pro came out in February. February 2nd, day and date with that launch, we put out the Archive app. And with that app, let's play the next video. You can see, you can really take things out of the archive and just walk around them. And I've seen this real 6-foot version of this, right? This is what I showed earlier from the Paul Allen estate. This thing looks better in the Vision Pro. I mean, it's catching shadows. You can move it around. You can scale it. It's an incredible experience. So the Vision Pro is a really great, stepping stone towards experiencing this ultimately in the holodeck. Everything we're creating in the Roddenberry Archive, ideally, it's meant to be rendered in something akin to the holodeck in the future. And the Vision Pro gives us a stepping stone. Even the way we sort of let you interface with things with touch, it's really pretty great. And it's a good way for us to understand how close we are to providing the experiences you might have when you do get a real-life holodeck. As I mentioned, the challenges of rendering for the Vision Pro are higher than just normal 4K or 2D rendering. We have also been rendering spatial volumes that you can walk through at 90 frames a second, 4K locally. Navigation between these is pretty interesting in spatial. I mean, there's a whole operating system dedicated to this. I think it's really compelling. And then one of the last pieces I want to show from the archive is the Enterprise J, which is an amazing piece. I've seen this on the Vision Pro. You can look into that ship. It's hundreds of years after Picard. It's got a glass dome, and inside is an actual holodeck the size of the ship. You can have islands and gardens and forests, and it's beautiful. And seeing it in the Vision Pro makes me realize, just appreciate the asset much more. And ending on where we began with the holodeck, we partnered in 2018 with a company called Lightfield Lab. I actually invested in them. They're creating the real-life holodeck. It's incredible. These panels that they create are coming out this decade, and it'll be used in large format venues like concerts. Effectively, you have a Vision Pro experience without wearing glasses, right? And building for that has been challenging. We started with projectors. We do model on the Vision Pro with the AR kit or iPads before that. And those panels can be stitched together. They're real white light emissive holographic panels. They need 16 GPUs per panel to power, so it's not a today technology. But this is what it looks like. It's hard to take a 2D picture of a hologram, but that is a real hologram. I've seen it with my own eyes. It's incredible. You can take a magnifying glass to it, and it's like having the real object in front of you. And in fact, one of the other investors besides me in this project is Bill Gates. There he is, and posts an Instagram video, which you can go see on his Instagram feed, of him actually taking a magnifying glass to that very asset. There's nothing quite like it. This technology is fundamental. It's a little bit crazy to think that 300 years is not how long it's going to take for the holodeck to be real. It's expensive, but like everything else with economies of scale, it'll be something that you'll see in TVs and tabletops probably in 5 years everywhere. Samsung and LG are investors as well. So the idea is this gets licensed to them, gets integrated in every display screen you have, and everything that you can imagine from spatial computing, VR, AR, if this can work in ways that don't require us to wear anything, that's life-changing. So for us, the idea is with the Roddenberry Archive, eventually you can just walk into it and experience it, and that's the future we all want. And of course, for us, the Blender being such a big part of it, we're excited to hook up all these things to the Blender community and to our own use of Blender. And on that note, thank you all very much. This has been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.